On the positive side, we consider the child to be the most innocent, to be the fresh-born, the newborn, the very innocent child. That part that always sees life anew, the brand new day, a whole new beginning. Play that child metaphor again and again and again, where everything can be reborn, the rebirth, the fresh beginning. That part of us, optimism, this is the child archetype in a healthy and powerful way at work within our psyches. When you look at children, when you look at the child within you, I want you to connect a dot. It is the child in us that expects a protected life, that expects a perfect life, that expects life to be very nurturing and very safe, and that expects that nothing should happen to us if we don't deserve it. The child within you is the part of you that views life as to whether or not it's fair or not, to whether or not you deserve something or not. It is the child in you that is first introduced to the concept of you did this, therefore you deserve that. Now, whether or not it's punitive or a gift, you were so good you deserve a treat. You were so bad you deserve to be in your room. It is the child that first learns the principle of cause and effect that manifests as due and deserve when you're little. So when the rational part of you as an adult sees something in your life that you feel you didn't deserve, I want you from this point on to tell yourself, that's my child looking at this. That's not me. I am now looking through the eyes of my child in this moment when I see that. This is not an adult talking or seeing this. Think about how different your life would be if you truly were able to see in that moment that I'm looking at this as a child, therefore the choice that I will make from this point on about or in response to this situation, my child is making. I am now creating the next step of my reality as a child. Now, I have taught people this for a long, long time, of how to think in these terms, how to use their archetypes exactly in this way, how to step back and say, what part of me is responding to this circumstance? This, I want to emphasize with you, is what it means to take this material and apply it practically to the day-to-day activity and co-creation of the events and the quality of your life. If you can step back and say, you know what, my child is taken over here, and I've got to step out of this situation and put that child away, because that child right now is a screaming, demanding brat. And if I let it call the shots in this situation, if I let that part of me speak to this person, I am going to do something that I'll regret. And not only that, once you begin to identify that, you can see that the people in your life were serving a much higher purpose than you ever realized before. I remember in the 1980s, the wounded child archetype came into prominence. And there were a number of books out on the wounded child, and a number of people, certainly that I knew because of my work and my personal life, began to go to therapists to pursue their wounded child and to heal their wounded child. And I remember among my dearest friends, a woman who jumped right on this wounded child bandwagon. She came to my home one day. I lived on a farm, and she said, "This therapy is absolutely wonderful. You should look into your own wounded child." I said, "I don't have a wounded child." And I started laughing. I said, that's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard in the whole of my life. And I really meant it. I felt insulted. I was appalled that someone would even suggest such a thing to me. Shortly after that, I was giving a lecture. I was giving this lecture in northern New Hampshire to a lovely group of dentists who got together every year for a meeting. They were just an exquisite group of people, and there were about 20 of them. I was describing the relationship between stress and illness, and I did not have a lot of examples up my sleeve in those days because I had just started, so I had to reference some of my own illnesses, which I am uncomfortable doing in spite of the fact that I'm actually doing it right now, but I am uncomfortable doing that, but I had to. And I was describing the fact that I had whooping cough and I had strep throat, and as I listed the types of disorders that I had endured, one of the dentists, this woman with incredible insight, said, Carolyn, I want to ask you a question. How come someone your age only gets children's illnesses? And I'm not thrown a curveball on stage very often. I'm a well-seasoned traveler in this area of life. But that took the wind out of my gut. I didn't have an answer. And I experienced, I felt, I sensed an energetic being, half pattern and half conscious, independent of me, pop out of my unconscious like a little chick out of an egg, saying, so you thought it was you all along? I was absolutely stunned, and I said to this group, would you excuse me for a moment? And I went into the hall and I sat down. In that moment, I had 1,000 moments, one of which was I thought I knew myself. I thought I knew all the elements that were at work within me. I thought that I was beyond this level of behavior. In that moment, the pieces of my life lined up, and it was as if the child archetype was a puppet master, and underneath it were all the fragments of my psyche that I had no idea I had. Number two, I had no idea how powerful a fragment of the psyche was. Number three, I had no idea of the depth to which I didn't know myself. It truly was an epiphany, an instantaneous knowing that reshapes your life and all the pieces of your life instantaneously, and you can't stop it. You cannot stop this light bulb from going on. And I had tampered so long with the unconscious, it was as if it had to come forward and strut its stuff. I took a look at this child archetype, and in that instant, it seemed as though all of the experiences of my life, except for 5, 6, 8, were completely under the charge of the child archetype. Whereas, prior to lunch that day, I said there was no such thing. I was completely upside down. After that, I started to look at my life and everything in reference to this child archetype. Consciously, I would have said, I have no wounded child archetype in me. I did not have a wounded childhood. I was not abandoned. I grew up in a collective family. I still get together with my family on weekends. We are always together. We've been loving and nurturing, and I'm not painting a mythic picture. I come from a very close and loving tribe. So the idea of a wounded childhood struck me as being preposterous because I couldn't find the wound. Not until I expanded my first chakra archetype into the larger atmosphere of my life, into my life's first chakra, did I identify the wounds from my childhood. It wasn't in my immediate family, but it was within the tribal experience of my youth at age 7 and 8 and 9 and 10. There I found the wounds. I was not part of the social family of the school that I was in. I was not part of the social fabric of friendship. I was not part of the groups that form when you're 8 and 9 and 10 years old and you begin to form collective little bodies of friendships. I was not part of the athletes of the school. As a matter of fact, the first time I ever was drafted in a basketball class or gym class where they were playing basketball, I was so overwhelmed that at the end of the game, both sides wanted to know what side I was playing for. And that was so humiliating that I did hide out in the shower during gym class because that's where someone like me belonged. Now, my point is that I couldn't find that archetypal pattern till I realized I had to stretch it and stretch it and stretch it until I found it in my life. Then I could take it back, and then I could see how in my personality that huge wounded child had indeed made its way in, and it surfaced not when I was sitting across the table from a family member, but when I was out of my family and into social groups. So with the child, you can see that there are a number of aspects, as you'll discover with every single archetype. The task for you as an individual is to find the aspect that you relate to. Because in spite of the fact that a child or any archetype has so many aspects, I can assure you that there is one that you relate to more than the others. And it's that part of you that you want to be able to identify in motion, interacting in any given situation. Again, I want to emphasize, the more aware you are of what archetype is controlling you or influencing you in any given moment, the more you can become aware of whether or not you want to make the choice that archetype's making. So, having said that, let's move on to the next archetype, which is the victim. Now, from the shadow point of view, meaning the part of us where we are inclined to feel like a victim, the victim archetype draws out of us the parts of us that make us feel vulnerable, the parts of us that make us realize that we have yet to develop self-esteem. Now, I wanted to emphasize that we aren't born with high quantities of self-esteem in our soul. We have to earn self-esteem. We have to develop it. It does not emerge naturally in us. We develop self-esteem by challenging within ourselves the voice of the victim. It's the victim that will say to you, you know you don't think you can swim this length. You know you don't feel you can do this. And we are meant to have this voice. You see, the victim causes that part of us within to take charge and to confront the physical challenges of life that would cause us, let's jump for a minute, just for a second, into the prostitute, to negotiate our spirit for safety. It's the victim in us that makes us deal with the illusion that everybody in the outside world has authority over our lives and we have none. And through engaging in the challenges that are inherent to the victim within us, I want to take you across that bridge now. We become very victorious. There is a part of us that starts to feel the power within that you cannot feel theoretically. The only way you start feeling that power inside yourself is because you've made a choice that ignites courage. That is the only way. You must take action to challenge the victim within. It is through facing, for example, one of the most common victim fears, that you will not be able to take care of yourself financially. In confronting that part of yourself, it's almost a classic pattern where one day you wake up and you think, I will not allow you to have charge of me anymore. It's simply not going to happen. I can't afford to be intimidated by you. I can't afford to be controlled by you. And for the first time, you take charge of your life and you make choices that empower you instead of disempower you. Everybody knows what it feels like to finally get to that point in their lives where the victim no longer has the level of clout it had yesterday. When you have a grip on your victim, let's introduce the dynamics of co-creation. When you know that you have what it takes to be victorious, the authority you have to co-create your reality increases, and I'm picking this number arbitrarily, but it increases, let us say, 100-fold. And the reason is because life and the dynamics of life don't scare you anymore. When you have a fear of life, when there's that strong victim within you, what that means is you will fear change in your life. You will fear the possibility that you might be alone. You will think everything in life is potentially a harmful experience to you. You will always fear things before you trust them. You will always think that people are primarily going to take advantage of you. Some people are victimized by clothes. They feel their clothes aren't as good, and other people, to say that doesn't interest them is a masterpiece of understatement. Other people feel very victimized by the fact that they don't have 17 college degrees, and it makes them feel like they're victimized at work because everybody else has an alphabet behind their name. What makes you feel victimized is relative, but I will tell you this. If you could figure out the 6 or 7 areas of your life, this makes me feel like a victim, this does, he always has, she always has, then cross the bridge to the symbolic side of your life. You would realize that you are connected to everybody else who has that issue. That's a form of an attitude tribe. You share an energetic dynamic with everybody else who has that same pattern of victimization. It's an enormously powerful insight. And when you realize that as you work to co-create your reality, I want you to keep this in mind, that so long as you are connected to those fears that make you feel like a victim, you don't create your reality. They do. They do. I've done readings on people, they have illnesses, and I've said, you can try this method of healing or try that method of healing, and I look at them, I look at their face, and I realize I'm not talking to one person, I'm talking to 4,000. I'm talking to 4,000 people through that person. And those 4,000 people do not believe that aromatherapy works. Therefore, no matter what this person sitting in front of me says, aromatherapy will remain only a perfume. This is, again, the practical nature of learning to cross that bridge and seeing your symbolic world. Let's go into the prostitute. The prostitute pattern essentially represents this. That's whether or not we will negotiate our power, not just our bodies. Bodies are the caboose on the train of the prostitute. The question is, will you negotiate your power? Whether you do it physically is one form of that negotiation. But people negotiate their opinions, they negotiate their thought process, they negotiate their emotions. Let's look at it this way. I want you to think again of all the circuits coming into the top of your head. And what the prostitute archetype represents are the challenges in your life that would allow you to sell some of your circuits to another person so that that person can use your creative energy for his or her creative enterprises in life. That's what the prostitute is about. Will you sell your circuits? Now, it may be that your circuits end up representing the sale of your physical body. Quite frankly, it doesn't matter in the long run. What matters is that you come to terms with realizing you've just sold your honor, or that you can be bought. And when the light finally goes on, and you admit, I can be bought, that changes immediately the quality of choices that you make in your life. I had a conversation reading recently with this woman who said, I've always been a prostitute. I've never not been, and I fully admit it. My security in paying that mortgage is a lot more important to me than whether or not I agree with somebody in my office that I might never see again. She said, so I intend to remain a prostitute because you know what? It works and it pays my bills. But why I admired that was because she admitted, and admitted's not even the right word. She acknowledged that she had an awareness of herself. Her prostitute was an honest prostitute. And this is what I would call, let's go to the other side of the bridge, because the natural question is, well, what's the positive side of this? It's the sacred prostitute, where you know the nature of your power, like this woman did, who said, I know exactly what I'm doing, and I also know my boundaries. She couldn't be bought for every reason, but she knew why she was doing it, and the reason I call it sacred is because it wasn't costing her any power. Why? She wasn't lying to herself. She wasn't lying to herself. And because she had such an open rapport with this part of her energy, she learned from her prostitute. She could study it. She didn't repress it. It became a sacred part of her spiritual path. Mary Magdalene is an example of the sacred prostitute. But I'll give you another example, because this is an archetype that has always had a bad reputation. It's also an archetype that's only been associated with women, well, let's say for the most part. And it's also an archetype that is rarely associated with being of benefit. So when you're called a prostitute, that rarely is a compliment. You have to work at appreciating how powerful and how inspirational these 4 archetypes are. They are not negatives. They are patterns in you that bring out your strength. There is a man that I know in California. He works at a hospice for people with AIDS. And many people with AIDS have had the experience of other people not wanting to touch them. Well, what this man does in the hospice is he knows these people are longing to be touched and hugged. And somebody with full-blown pneumocystis or KS, they're not attractive. It's just not attractive. And it's hard and it's frightening. And he is HIV positive. What he does is he gets in bed with them, and he holds them, and he sleeps with them. And if they want some stimulation, he offers that, because in his mind, this is the graceful gift of dignity. This is his sacred prostitute. And I think it is a very sacred act. There are aspects of that in us where you realize that so long as you're honest and honorable, even sometimes about your dishonor, it is sacred. Do you see what I'm saying? It's an irony to grasp this. Like this woman that I met, when you are honest about your dishonor, when you admit and don't repress. She said, I am working with this. I acknowledge it. She knew the boundaries of it. She knew how far she would go. And most importantly, she felt she was doing no one harm through her actions. And that was an important aspect. She said that if she felt she was beginning to harm someone because of her fears, then she knew she was in deep trouble. So while it sounds like a contradiction, I'm presenting this as a phase of spiritual evolution that we all go through. It's not just this woman. We all go through that phase of facing and confronting whether our integrity can be sold. And we all will sell it. And we all will claim it back, somehow. In addition to the sacred prostitute, the positive aspect is that you have that confidence that you can't be bought. And I have to tell you that that particular confidence is the core of self-esteem. It totally is the core of self-esteem. It is the substance of that teaching that you can be in the world but not of the world. The positive aspect of the prostitute is truly immeasurable because it's that part of you that heaven trusts so that you can be truly given great tasks and the gods know you can carry them out. Just as an example, I would refer you to the scriptures, and we can find this in all scriptures. But if you'll notice, before the great leaders are truly given their tasks, they're tested to find out if they could be bought. Whether Abraham would have killed Isaac, or whether Jesus would have sold out, no matter who, these spiritual teachers are approached to find out whether they would sell out their power to a higher source. And when their spirits become strong enough to say, there's nothing on the earth that you can possibly tell me or order me or anything, that's when the gods shower on them high quantities of spiritual power. Not that you do it for spiritual power, but you confront that prostitute in you, if only to feel good about yourself, which is the best reason, because it gives you so much power to be able to stand up and say, I don't care what you believe, I don't, and I will not compromise this. That's the positive side of this aspect. The final archetype of the survival archetypal team is the saboteur. Again, an archetype that is deeply misunderstood because it sounds like you are sabotaging your life, or that some force, some being, some dark angel is coming after you to sabotage your life, but that is not what it's all about. It's about setting up experiences in your life that show you again and again why you sabotage yourself. The saboteur will always be that critical aspect of yours that will find a way to tell you something will fail before inspiring you to see how it can succeed. The saboteur in you will always find a way of being so critical of a person that that bond of intimacy that part of you is longing for can't be built. The saboteur in you will always find a way to find the weakest link in any situation. The saboteur is a very controlling energy, ferociously controlling, because you can be in a situation with a lot of people who are presenting a wonderful potential future. But your saboteur will bring down, like a house of cards, the entire dynamic, because you will suggest all of the ways it can't work, instead of being optimistic about how you can handle anything. It's the saboteur in you that prevents you from trying anything or from becoming somebody new. I've said to many people, many people, usually women, that the best thing they could do to feel better about themselves is to go for a makeover. a complete makeover, and to do something outrageous, to do something they would never have truly done yesterday. Cut your hair, have your hair styled in a way that's outrageous. Just it'll grow back if you don't like it. And do a color, have it colored in a way you would never have done yesterday. And buy an outfit that's totally outrageous to your normal color schemes. If you're conservative, don't be. Do something. And why? It's not just for social attention. That's not why you're doing it at all. Why are you doing it? Because you want to change the energetic currents that are spinning in your energy field. That's why. You want a different color scheme? You want a different power scheme? You are literally doing a power energetic transformation. If I told you this like I tell a lot of women, why don't you do this? You haven't got a clue. How many? Well, I don't know. And I'm not even suggesting that they spend $1 gazillion. This little makeover could be done for under $100. And it has so much power. But they will sabotage it. People will say, I need to get some energy. I know people who have bought treadmills, taken out memberships to gymnasiums, but they don't go. They sabotage all that they can be, and then they create their excuses for it, their reasons. This is how the saboteur works, and the saboteur can be the most rational one of your archetypes. Oh, come on. Just start tomorrow. You know you're tired. You know you're exhausted. Can't you do this tomorrow? This is the saboteur. Always working to disempower you. But it's not this pattern that's trying to disempower you, but rather it is shining a light on why you want to be disempowered. So when you decide, that's it, yeah, I'm not going to go to the gym, I'll go tomorrow, knowing full well you won't at all go tomorrow. That's the point at which you sit down with yourself and you say, why do I do this? This is what it means to become conscious. To push yourself through that wall that says, why do I do this? Why do I prevent myself from becoming what I want to be? Which is healthy and empowered and vital and dynamic. Why am I doing this? I have all the chances in the world. Why do I sabotage myself? And you keep pushing until you can actually answer that question. As I mentioned earlier, there is no way that I could describe in great enough terms how much we fear change and how much we are inclined to sabotage the speed of change in our lives. I talk a great deal about forgiveness, and I now believe, because again I've seen this in so many people, that the reason why forgiveness is so difficult is twofold. One, of course, is the misunderstanding that you're saying to somebody what you did is okay. So that's the element of pride. That's where pride comes in. The other part is that people believe, again, this is archetypal, it is the child in us that believes, if I forgive, then God will give me something else that hurts to deal with. And so long as I still haven't forgiven yesterday, I can't have any pain for tomorrow. Oh yeah, people believe that. Absolutely. If I had time to meet each one of you, I would find a part of you that totally bought into that. And this is where, when I ask you as you listen to this series, not to respond immediately, but to listen and re-listen, listen and re-listen to the questions I ask or to the points I make. Because you don't know yourself that well. You don't know your archetypal patterns, and you don't know how deeply they are at work within you. You don't know how much you've sabotaged yourself. You don't even know what your saboteur feels like yet. And you have no idea when the victim in your unconscious has just taken over your conscious mind. You need to develop a rapport with that. You need to develop an intuitive rapport so that you know the difference in feel of the personality of your saboteur, your victim, your child, your prostitute, because they each have a different feel. You need to be able to sense when I am sabotaging an opportunity that this person has just brought into my life. And I need to understand why I'm doing that. Somebody could say to you, this is a tremendous investment. Wouldn't you like to be able to know whether or not it was? Wouldn't you love to be able to instinct that out? Apply your intuitive judgment? Tell that saboteur archetype to get out of your way, because all it does is pull out the fears of your yesterday and makes you run away from what could be the most magnificent opportunity for you? What an ability to be able to say. And this again is where the practical use of this information comes in, where you can see an opportunity, you're involved in a conversation with someone, and you pause and you say to that person, would you just give me 1 minute? And you sit down with these archetypes and you say, okay, I got to get into my unconscious. What's going on here? And you get the data, and your child says to you, you know what, I'm scared of this, and I'll tell you why. And your victim says, this is just the same old thing, and besides which, he reminds me of the last person that did business with you, and you know how that turned out. And your saboteur says, I gotta tell you something, I think that you're going to be scared to death over this, because if you take this opportunity and it just happens to be successful, then whatever will you do? And then the prostitute says, you could have a real ball if you made a lot of money. All of this starts activating. Then there's the next choice, which is, what would you choose if you could silence your shadow? If you were able to separate yourself from the fears that sabotage you, and take a different look and make choices from that altitude in your life. We're going to be pursuing that with these 4 archetypes in the areas that comprise the body of life: money, your career, love, relationships, and sexuality, creativity, decision-making, and your spiritual life. These are the issues that form the connective tissue of life. We're going to be taking each of those archetypes so that you can symbolically reorient your relationship to these energies, and then compare what choice you would make if you were empowered versus the choices that you are allowing your fears to make for you.